Hello and welcome to a very special Downstream IRL here at EartH Hackney. You may have heard of this guy, Zack Polanski. I don't know if this is just your training as an actor, but you look happy to be here.
I mean, it's a very, very lovely cheer. Thank you very much, everyone.
You told me something backstage.
Imagine if I went, no, I'm actually really, really anxious and upset. I want to be anywhere but talking to you, Ash.
What? You know, my husband told me the exact same thing earlier today. You actually told me something backstage which I really think that you ought to share with the group, something about a hidden talent.
Ash, I can't believe you're doing this to me. So today, Spiked, the right-wing journalist, put a picture together of me and Mamdani and said the failed theatre kids. As if comparing me to Mamdani is something that's going to, make me upset and really cry.
So what do you mean I'm handsome and successful?
Quite, right. And so what they don't know, and I suppose I'm revealing now, is I used to breakdance. But now with dodgy knees and Achilles ankles, it's not going to happen. Sorry, Ash, I know you're trying to get that scoop.
We were actually sprinkling talc down at the front to assist with the spinning. So look, right now, at the time that we're speaking, the Greens are just a couple of points behind Labour in national polling. You might catch up with them fairly soon. You might even overtake them. Are you surprised? Oh yeah, we've got a Green Party member, at least one. Have you been surprised by the pace at which the Green Party has grown, or was this always the plan?
I mean, it was the plan, but the speed at which it's happened. There's even been some polls where we have overtaken the Labour government. In fact, the second one came out a couple of days ago on Find Out Now. And although it's surprising because I think, you'd be pretty weird if you were like, the plan is always going to work out, I'm absolutely convinced. I think it's not a surprise that it's working out when you think about how bad this Labour government are behaving, particularly in light of the announcements made today. But also on the flip side of that, how much hope has been missing from politics. And actually, wherever I am, on the bus, in the street, in the barbers just now, people kind of stopping at the window to say, I'm feeling really, really hopeful. I'm feeling hopeful again. I think politics has been missing that for a long time. And whilst I'm really, really pleased to be some of the vehicle for that, where people are finding the hope, the bit I'm really interested in is what comes next. What does it look like when people go back to their communities, really engage, really get involved, really organise, and make that difference on the ground?
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about what comes next, because there's something which to me sounds a little bit like its intention, which is on the one hand you say, look, we're here to replace the Labour Party, so vote Green, that's what we want you to do. And on the other hand, you've talked about the fact that helping fascist Farage into power is a red line for you. In some seats, there'll be a straight run between Labour and Reform. So how do you square these two things that you're saying, which is one, we're here to replace the Labour Party, don't let this government hold your votes hostage. But on the other, you've described Reform as a fascist party, and surely that creates a different kind of moral imperative.
Well, I think the way this question often gets asked is, will you work with other left-wing parties or centre-left parties? And I think the first thing to say is this Labour Party is not a left-wing party. When we have Shabana Mahmood going around saying that she's going to seize the jewellery of the assets of people seeking asylum. As a Jewish person with Jewish ancestry, that's literally what the Nazis will have done to my ancestors. And so we see this with the ongoing genocide in Gaza, we see it with disability cuts, we see it with the two-child benefit cap. So then I go, the general election is not tomorrow, and actually we have time to build this movement, and we're all heading in the right direction. And actually it comes back to the premise of your question. Replacing the Labour Party looks like saying there shouldn't be any Labour Reform seats, because actually we need to turn those seats into Green versus Reform seats and make sure that the Green Party beat the Reform Party. Now, does that sound like a stretch from where we are now? Yes. And to come back to your first question, we are exponentially growing. We're getting thousands of new members every single day. We're starting to poll above the Labour government. So I don't think it becomes long before you say to the Labour Party, come on, you're splitting the vote. Like ultimately, this is a Green versus Reform party. And if Keir Starmer, last thing I'll say, but if Keir Starmer doesn't feel like he can change anything, or if he feels like he's making despair normal again, his whole thing is there's no alternative, it has to be this way, then why is he even in politics? What is the point of being a Labour politician at this point?
So on this, like you're saying, okay, well, look at the pace of growth of the Green Party, look at how well we're doing in the polls. Does that mean that you're going to be expanding your target seats beyond the 39 or 40 where the Greens came second?
Yeah, so during the leadership campaign, I was saying that I hope to win 30 to 40 MPs. And so, you know, that would still be an amazing achievement. I'm not going to knock that, but it is starting to feel under-ambitious. Because actually what's happened with all of these new members is new resources and new people on the ground saying, actually, I want to campaign in my local area too. And so those 39 seats, I think, are a starting place to look for. But actually, it's really telling that Ellie Chowns and Adrian Ramsey came from 4th and 5th place to go to 1st place. So actually, 2nd place isn't the limitation to winning a Green seat. The limitation is having the right messaging, the right resourcing, and the right volunteers on the ground. And actually, that's starting to happen in more and more seats. So the next question, because you're a very good journalist, is how many seats are you going to go for, Zack?
How many seats are you going to contest?
And it's just too soon at the moment to know that. But what I will say is almost on a weekly basis, we're going back to the drawing board and saying, that's still not ambitious enough for what's happening right now. And the more that we see reform kind of growing and the more that we see the Labour Party pandering to reform, that is an insane electoral strategy. If people wanted Nigel Farage a reform, they'd just vote for reform. And I think the more that Labour spiral into this awful, toxic, divisive politics, the more there is a space for a hopeful, ambitious party like the Green Party, and we absolutely intend to take that opportunity.
I can see you're impressing these people. So I've got to come up with a real shitter of a question now. At the moment, there is a pretty sizable debate on the left, and this is really a result of a high-profile conflict that's occurring within your party. But I want to ask you to address this about your vision for the Green Party. How broad a church do you want it to be? What's the window of tolerance for the range of perspectives you're comfortable seeing in your membership?
Well, first of all, I think it can be really broad, particularly in terms of geography, so I'd start there. I was speaking to Yanis Varoufakis yesterday for my podcast, Bold Politics. Always plug a podcast.
Did someone wolf whistle Yanis Varoufakis?
He probably deserves it.
Find God.
And Yanis was very lovely. People will be able to see the podcast, and he said he was really excited by the political project I was doing, and he felt like it was the right one, and he very much offered his kind of public and private support. And he said during it, I think there are seats that maybe you can't win, places like in the Northeast, for instance. And actually, Green Party membership has over doubled in the last 2 months. But actually, the place that it's gone highest is London, right here in Hackney, actually. And the second place is in the Northeast. And I think that's what that's speaking to, is places like the Northeast that reform is not some kind of abstract threat. You've got reform winning councils there. And I think people there are going, actually, joining the Green Party and getting involved is not a nice to have. It's not like a hobby to do at the weekend. This is something that is existential for our city and for our politics. And so more and more people are getting involved. So in terms of how broad can the coalition be, I think that's about the Green Party continuing to do what we already are, which is being the lead opposition party and saying we are going to take on both this failing Labour government, but actually we're absolutely going to take the fight to reform. Now, in terms of politics, beyond geography, there are core principles of the Green Party. We are anti-racist, anti-homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, and those are not kind of negotiables. In terms of the politics of our policies, so the one that drives me crazy, and I'll go straight there, is people say to me, I'm really, really worried about reform. I'm really, really worried about fascism. I love everything that you and the Green Party are doing. I'd get involved, but I don't like your policy on nuclear energy. Like, it's a very, very specific policy. And my answer, beyond me having the discussion about nuclear energy, is we're a fully democratic party. We are one member, one vote. We have policy working groups. Any member, whether they've been in the party for 20 years or they join the party after listening to this talk, that's just a subtle hint there.
You really just planted that seed. It's like, when there are flash images in The Shining or something to try and...
Careful, you'll make me sound like a hypnotist or something.
I thought they were getting bigger.
But quite seriously, anyone can vote on party policy. And actually what I would say to people is it's too much of a luxury to find one policy you disagree with when ultimately you look at the threat of what the far right is doing to this country. And so I'd say to anyone, get involved with the Green Party.
Would that mean that the Green Party would tolerate a member or a group of members who said, okay, well, we want to introduce policy that's against self-ID? or something like that?
That's not something I personally welcome to the party. Now, there are laws in place that say those things are protected beliefs, so people can't say you're not allowed in a party, you're not allowed to have those conversations. And also, I think, I know you've done a lot of work on this, that the kind of quote-unquote cancel culture, I think, has eroded a lot of our politics and the ability to have discussion. So I do think we need to have discussions. I think we need to have discussions in ways that are respectful. And most importantly, I think the people with the protected characteristics who are the most affected need to make sure we're sharing the space with those people so their voices are heard. So it's not that people can't join the party who have those beliefs, but what I would say is it's about how you behave with those beliefs. And the red line for me is simply misgendering. Now, I've misgendered people before by accident, I'm sure you have. And you apologize and then you move on. But that's not what I've seen in the past in other spaces where people are just constantly misgendered. I think that's clearly harassment. And sure, if you want to do that in society, I don't think that's okay, but I'm not the leader of society. But in terms of being a party, I think it's perfectly right for a party to say, this is how we behave in this party, this is what we believe, and if you don't believe that or you don't want to behave that way, other parties are available.
You use the phrase red line, so I'm going to do an awful pun. In terms of a particular red line, do you see the Green Party as turning into a socialist party, or is your vision for a party that has socialists in it?
I think we're already a socialist party, and I know we get into this discussion a lot. Like, I consider myself a socialist. I think when you look at party policy, I think you'd really be struggling to say that isn't socialist policy. I think that's a wider conversation about how do you label those policies, and I just find the conversations about socialism and capitalism lose a lot of the people who wouldn't be spending their Monday night in this room as much as I love people who are spending Monday night.
He just called you nerds.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as I said it, I was like, what have I just said to all of these people? Whoops.
Losing the entirety of Hackney in one fell swoop.
No, it is really important. It's important we gather in rooms like this to have this discussion. I think it's important to have a discussion about socialism. So it's not rejecting those conversations. I think there's really important spaces for those conversations. I think in terms of the public, though, and that's ultimately who I want to be talking to, the wider public, I think we need to be talking about the food on their table, the heat in their homes, and yes, the means of production, but in the way that they would translate that. What is it like when you go to work? Do you have democratic control at work? Do you feel like you're in charge of your life? Do you feel like you're in charge of your politics? Do you feel like politics is being done with you rather than to you? I think those are all the vital questions rather than getting into what can sometimes seem like philosophical conversations about socialism and capitalism. And by the way, I put NATO in that territory too. I've been really, really clear that I'm not any supporter of NATO. And I think we should be looking at working with our European neighbours in terms of closer alliances. I think Brexit was an absolute disaster. But I think to lead a movement at the moment where really we should be talking about lowering bills and taxing billionaires, but leading that conversation with a conversation about foreign policy, I think is disconnected from what a lot of people in this country care about. That's not to say that NATO isn't important. It's not to say imperialism is an important conversation to have. But I think you've always got choices as a politician and a political party about what is the first thing that comes out of your mouth and what do people remember you for. And you might have heard me say this before, but lower bills, tax billionaires.
That's true, but
That deserved a bigger round of applause.
Don't clap him. Don't clap him. But I want to pick something up on that, which is I can totally see how, from a strategic point of view, you say, look, we're going to focus on these bread and butter economic issues, and foreign issues sort of takes a backseat strategically, right? As politicians, you have to prioritize. But Gaza has been such a prominent part of your campaign. It's been something that you've led with, and I think also, not to put it too crudely, the Labour Party's material and political support for an ongoing genocide has benefited the Greens politically. Lots of people then gave you their votes. Does that mean that you're going to have that issue recede as you focus on bread and butter economic issues?
Not at all. So I feel like you're phrasing the question slightly differently to what I meant, which I'll take responsibility for because I'll add clarity. It's about making sure that we have absolute solidarity to people around the world who are facing genocide or conflict. That's obvious in Gaza, but also Sudan, Yemen, Syria, lots of places where actually British intervention has considerably made things worse. It's really important that we're really clear about that. What I'm saying, I think, is not hypothetical. We can look at Zoran Mamdani, who has been absolutely incredible in focusing on those bread and butter issues, and every time he's asked about a trans person, a disabled person, a migrant, Palestinians, he's shown absolute solidarity. It's not been wavering for a second, it has been unconditional, and he has pointed out that inequality is making those things worse, and he gets straight back to the economic issues. So once again, we need to lower bills and tax billionaires and show absolute solidarity to migrants, trans people, and indeed Palestinians.
I want to move on just a little bit because we're going to hear from Corey Doctorow shortly on the idea of enshittification, which is basically a story about how online platforms went from being novel and exciting, even liberatory, to crap, conformist, just a terrible experience to be on. We're in roughly the same kind of age bracket. I'm not going to say which one it is. Which
the
means
cool kids.
you can probably remember your first dial-up modem, right?
Sure.
The internet entering your life. What was your first experiences of the internet like, and did online culture, online community play any role in shaping your politics?
Yeah, I think it was pretty huge in terms of, it depends how you define politics. It certainly was not party political. But in terms of the politics of being LGBT and finding a community, and also the politics of being like a gay Jewish kid at school that was bullied and just feel like I didn't feel like it, I literally had no friends. So being able to go to the internet and escape to the internet both had all the benefits of finding a community and some of the dangers back then of seeing things I probably definitely should not have seen at that age. And I think it's not just in the internet world we see this enshittification. I think a lot about our public-private spaces. So I think of places where you go around London or any city and there's a space that used to be publicly owned. And there's often those little signs that say, you can't eat after 6 p.m. You can't take photos here. You're under CCTV. You can't skateboard here or breakdance. And all of those spaces that are really, really important to have those communities. And I think those communities are often how people start to first find their politics. A lot of my politics started actually in Trocadero. There used to be, I'm coming back to breakdancing. I really didn't think this was going to be a theme of tonight. But I used to go practice breakdancing there, like on a Saturday with lots of kind of young people. When I was young, I'm not talking about when I was an adult now, that would be weird. And you would go there, and the amazing thing, it was free. So you'd spend like 5-6 hours with friends, making friends, or people you haven't met, where you'd be learning new tricks, but also you just sit down for a while and chat to people that weren't necessarily, certainly not from me, having grown up in like a Jewish, pretty religious community, to then be in London, like in Trocadero, learning to breakdance, spending more time with people. I feel like that's what society is when it's at its best. And then, it comes back to Thatcher. She said there's no such thing as society. Always comes back to Thatcher, right?
There's only individuals
right,
and
exactly.
families.
And then
That was my Thatcher.
Spitting image, need to hire you quick. I'm waiting for my spitting image puppet. But anyway, I'm sure it's going to be lovely and flattering. And then the Conservative government came along and committed austerity and literally destroyed those public spaces where people could gather together, eat together, pray together, disagree together. Then the Labour government are continuing with that austerity, and then they have the audacity to say that we don't have integration. How do you expect people to integrate in public spaces if you've taken those public spaces away? And so to come back to your question, I think we're seeing that on the online world too. This increasing kind of corporatization of those spaces where people can have conversations or questions. We see this through the Online Safety Act, where just trying to find out about Gaza or various issues around the world can suddenly be censored, particularly by corporate capital. You can see how quickly dangerous the unregulated environment is. But then when you call for regulation, the question always is, who do you trust? And I don't know about people in this room, but I don't particularly trust this Labour government to get anything right. So I think there is a dangerous question right now, both about private or public online space, but also the public spaces that should be our spaces. But a few wealthy individuals have taken our power, our assets, and our wealth, and I believe it's time to take them back.
I want to ask a little bit. Yeah, you can get clapped for that one. I want to ask a little bit about AI. So from what I can tell, the Green Party policy on AI is fairly limited, calling for a clear regulatory framework and an ombudsman. Does that compromise the totality of your own personal views about the impact of AI on work, education, information, even how we date and interact with each other? Yeah, not how we date, but how we date.
I'd be punching, I know it. I think it's nuanced because I'm not a digital Philistine. I think that AI probably has, or definitely has, an important role to play. There are lots of people doing crap jobs who don't want to be doing those jobs and actually could be spending their time doing things that they feel fulfilled by, whether that's at work, feeling like they're more connected to the day-to-day things that really matter to them, or even maybe radically not working as much and being paid more. We were always promised that we would do less work and get more money, and for the majority of people it's the other way around. We're working more hours and getting paid less in terms of the standard of living. I think the real problem, though, is about who this government listens to. And we know that they are in bed. I don't think I want to do this image. Keir Starmer is in bed with the tech bros. And the TUC were running...
Just let that linger in your mind's eye for a little bit.
The TUC were running a brilliant campaign around creative workers and doing collective bargaining for creative workers. And then Peter Kyle went straight to the tech bros. I was lucky enough to be on Laura Kuenssberg the same day Elton John was asked about this. And his quote, and it's Shakespeare, was, "Peter Kyle's a moron." I mean, Elton John said it, not me. But quite seriously, I think it's about how much this government are willing to sell people out. And I don't trust AI in this government's hands when they're not protecting workers' jobs. And we don't just see this with AI, we see it with the steel industry, where the best time to nationalize our industries and to protect workers' jobs would have been 10, 20 years ago, and they just didn't have that conversation. And actually what I really think we should be doing is removing fossil fuel subsidies from oil and gas and using that money to subsidize the new transition for the new jobs. And I think AI plays its role in there in terms of where are these conversations happening, where you're getting the people who may potentially lose their jobs around the table to go, what do these future jobs look like with the advent of AI, and how can we make sure you have better lives, rather than pushing money into AI, letting them have unregulated work, and then saying to the people who lose their jobs, sorry, that's a bit crap.
I want to ask you one last question before we go to the audience Q&A. And they've got to be real questions, not this is more of a comment than a question. Real questions end with question marks, right? So, and don't just try and fool me with an upwards intonation either. My last question for you is this, and it's a really simple one. What's your vision of the good life?
I think it's one where we can spend more time with the people we love. And I think love and compassion are really important qualities that rarely get talked about in politics. I think for a long time politicians kind of shied away from them because they felt a bit icky or that the public might not like it. And all of those things might be true, but then I think there's a job to do. Then how do we center compassion, not just for refugees or people in war zones, but actually for each other, for neighbors, for strangers? I think it looks like a universal basic income where people have food on the table, they're able to pay their rent, they're able to get transport to work if they've got a job, or be able to get a job if they want one, and they feel supported. I think it looks like one where we center creativity and arts, where people feel like they're not constantly having to just do the STEM subjects or just produce or just create growth in the way that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer want to turn us into these robotic machines making growth for BlackRock. But actually we can spend time doing the things that we love just for the sake of the fact that we love them. And actually, even if there's no economic productivity at the end of it, that's also fine. It's completely fine to be human beings. And I think it looks like a society where people are able to spend time with strangers if they want to. I know you're someone who might have particular feelings about being forced to spend time with strangers when you're not choosing to, or various people might feel like that.
I confided that I hate people. Is what that's referring to.
I felt like I had to widen it to the rest of the audience before I made it sound like Ash just hates people. But I do think for so many of us, like being able to have those spaces where you can just have human connection with people is what the good life looks like. And we've had a politics that for so long has tried to get people to divide, to point at each other, to be jealous, or to point to scarcity, or tell people if they have a faster car, or a nicer, bigger house, or another loft conversion, everything's going to be okay. I think the good life looks like when we can rid ourselves of all of those addictions and say, sure, I'm speaking from privilege here. If you're living in poverty, I can imagine why you want some more money, and I totally get it. But if you're living a comfortable life where you're more than surviving, you're actually thriving, a good life looks like where you're not in constant competition to beat your neighbors or someone in your community. You're actually going, what does it look like just to be happy and just to love? And that's good.
I agree with all that, but sometimes you got to beat your neighbors when your neighbors are Arsenal. So if I could get some house lights, because that way I can see who booed. Let's take some hands. All right, we've got someone right there, back row, hand up. We've got one there, front row, and let's have stripy shirt as well.
I wanted to ask you, how do you make climate agenda a main agenda in political manifestos and not just for symbolism, but actually get people feeling about it and that it will affect them and not just people who are focusing on sustainability, climate, or who are pursuing that in academic field? And how will you and your party try to solve that?
Amazing. So I think very often the climate agenda gets pitted against the cost of living agenda. We hear this constantly. We hear it particularly from Reform, and it's always important to point out that Reform took £2.3 million from fossil fuel companies, from climate denying companies, and then it's not a surprise that they go out on TV and then say we're anti-net zero. I think George Carlin said that politicians should wear sweatshirts like NASCAR drivers that says who sponsors them at all times. I think that would be really good for Reform to have. I think we've really got to take on this agenda, and the way we've got to do it is not by telling people they're wrong or they've got to change their individual behavior. Now look, Ash is going to love this, I'm sure. I'm vegan, I don't drive, I don't fly. Like, if you were looking for like the CV of a Green Party leader, I could go to Central Casting and I would be fine. But this is not the point.
It's very swipe left for me.
Yeah.
Very swipe left.
Our dating life is broken twice in this way. But actually, I think, if anyone can do those things and they have the power and privilege to do them, hey, Ash, people should make those choices. I think. But what we can't do is speak to people in working class communities particularly who are really struggling, who might be a single mother who's struggling with their kids, and you're then saying, oh no, you shouldn't be going on the school run with your car when there isn't even a bus in place, or if there is a bus, it's ridiculously expensive. We've got to change those things systemically. All of those things are individual choices made by politicians. We can make different choices. I think the most obvious example is I went to Sheffield the other day. It cost me a fortune on the train. I'm sure if I'd flown, I didn't fly, so no clipping this. If I had flown, I'm sure it would have been much cheaper. Now that's not a coincidence. That's because we subsidize aviation more than we subsidize train travel. So in terms of what are we going to do about the climate agenda, I think subsidize the right things, make sure that we're really investing in renewables and solar and wind. And more than anything, to know that having the right facts is not going to cut it. We need to recognise that there are powerful vested interests. And I've named Reform, but it's also important to say the Labour government are really at it too. So just pointing out every single time that a politician is going on TV or radio, wherever it may be, and being anti-net zero, there is usually a vested interest, and we've got to expose it.
Right at the back there. Yep.
Given that Corey's talking later, I wanted to ask if either of you have read, watched, or listened to any sci-fi recently.
Great question.
I love sci-fi. I was about to say I love Doctor Who, but so Radio 4 did a show on me recently called Profile, and it was basically like half an hour about my life. And the one thing they took away from my boyfriend is he said, the thing about Doctor Who fans is they're always disappointed. And I love that's the one thing he got to represent me with. And I love Russell T Davies, but I've been pretty disappointed with Doctor Who recently. There's also like a brilliant Korean series that someone's going to have to shout out the name of it, because I did genuinely watch it, but I can't remember the name of it. It's got 3 words. No, not Squid Game.
Squid Game.
I've created a mass audience exercise now.
What's the plot?
It's basically like the moon starts to lose its gravity and all sorts of things.
Moon, gravity?
Yes, three-body
problem.
And I just described it really badly as well. It's no thanks to the moon.
The moon Chinese, not Korean. The moon is fine.
Let's get it out. What I would say in defense is I've been quite busy leading a political party.
Three-body problem, great. Have you read the book?
No.
It's pretty long, so maybe you shouldn't make time for it now, but it is
great. To be honest, I'm saying I enjoyed the series. By episode 5 or 6, I was losing the will to live, which is partly why I can't remember what I watched. But hopefully the book's much better.
Right, stripy shirt.
Have you had any discussions with any trade unions about affiliation? Will you have those discussions? And if you are going to have them, how do you have a relationship with them when you might have a bit of a distance on certain issues?
I love a 3-part question. I realized things had changed dramatically when a couple of days after I'd been elected as leader of a party, I went to the TUC Congress. And I mistakenly said to a member of staff who was going to come with me, oh no, I'll be fine. And I came and I literally got mobbed the moment that I came through the door. And as much as that would be lovely for my ego, I think it's much deeper than that. I think it's workers recognizing that they deserve better representation. Now, I'm being careful how I say this because there is trade union leadership that's doing incredible work, and I'm not knocking that. I also think there is trade union leadership that increasingly the workers within those trade unions are looking at them and saying, I'm paying my subs, we're affiliated to the Labour government. Not only are they not doing good stuff for workers, they're pretty much spitting in our faces at this point. We're not getting anything from it. So the first thing I want to do is speak to those workers and say, if you're in the Green Party already, amazing. When you go to your local trade union branch, speak up about it. I don't mean in the way that you necessarily need to wave a Green Party banner, although you're welcome to do that too, but just actually saying there isn't this big gap between the trade union movement and the Green Party. I know already there are loads of members in the Green Party who are very active in the trade union movement too. I think we need to create that link in terms of being more vocal about it. The second thing is I meet trade union leadership pretty much all the time. I'm very often having those meetings. Those meetings, if I'm honest with you, are almost always based on policy. What can we be pushing in Parliament right now? What can I be pushing when I have a microphone in front of me? I think they know that I'd love affiliation, but also at the same time, I'm not kind of desperate for it, because what I think is more important is the disaffiliation from the Labour Party. I think indeed, that definitely deserves a round of applause. I think the premise of your question is fair enough, that as soon as trade unions affiliate, then they understandably are expecting things and want things. And in a party system that's totally democratic, I think there then becomes a relationship about how do the workers get involved in that system within the Green Party. And so I'd absolutely love to talk about affiliation. There are also unions that I'm working with very closely. I really want to shout out UVW. This is United Voices of the World. They're based in London. They're a migrants union. Pretty much any time they have a picket, I'm always happy to turn up. And I think UVW have said this out loud. They've noticed that it's only Green Party politicians who are turning up to these picket lines. Just last week, I was at the British Library with PCS. They're also striking. Some of these workers at the British Library are having to take out loans. They're having to take out second jobs, despite the fact they're working full time. People are tired and exhausted, and their wages are not going up. Meanwhile, food prices are going up. And then we have unions still affiliated to the Labour Party with a Labour government who can do something about this, who are not only not doing anything about it, they're saying we need to make tough choices. Why are these always tough choices for disabled people, for people living in poverty, for children living in poverty? It is about time to have tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires, and it's time to tax for rich.
Right, I'm going to take 3 more questions, and because I've neglected the sort of middle of the room, that's where I'm going to be looking. So put up your hands from the middle of the room. Who's got a mic handy? All right, stripy shirt, take it away.
Yeah, hi. How are you going to because throughout society there's kind of been a loss of trust in institutions and even on an individual level. So how are you going to rebuild that and allow us to become more conjoined together? Because that's a real big thing that's going on.
Yeah, I think it's a crucial question, and I think it actually links a little bit to the first climate question too. So often I meet communities where they feel like politics has been done to them rather than with them. There was a supposed consultation, but actually the consultation just meant notification. It meant someone turned up and said, this is what we're doing. It was incredibly complicated. And then when they complained, there was no real recourse to have any feedback. I think this also needs to be balanced with the fact that I sometimes hear politicians, if they're being ultra-democratic, just say, oh, I'm just going to listen to the people, I'm just going to turn up. I think it has to be in the middle. So politics is not having a blank sheet of paper, turning to an audience and going, what are your ideas? I'm just going to do that. Neither is it finding exactly where people are, running into the crowd and going, yes, I'm going this way too. I think it's about having a really strong set of values and ideals that you can communicate and that you're never going to compromise on. Then it's about finding a tone that isn't lecturing, it's not hectoring, it's a genuine listening tone. And then you walk halfway, metaphorically or maybe literally, to where people are and say, I'm willing to come meet you, let's have a conversation about this, but you've also got to come away a little bit too. And for me, that's a model of leadership, which I think is about building trust. I think the final part, in answer to your question, is going to be a very, very strange thing for me to say, but in some ways, don't fully trust politicians. It should be a transactional relationship. If they're doing what you want them to do or what you've campaigned or voted for them to do, great. Cheer me all you want. But I think I really love the phrase, elect them today and fight them tomorrow. Because actually it's about getting the right people into power, and then it's about holding them to accountable. I was going to say every single day, but realistically, who has time for that? But metaphorically, every single time that you have a vote, or you can hold the politician to accountable, that's an important part of democracy, that it's not a one thing and you're done. It's about continuing that. And I think the real way to hold politicians to account, and I'll end my answer, I'm aware it's a long one, is not waiting for the ballot box, despite what I just said. It's about organizing in your communities and recognizing that a lot of this needs to exist outside the political system too. The ballot box and elected politicians can only take us so far. Actually, what really needs to happen is the organizing, whether it's workers, whether it's trade unions, whether it's a community group, a faith group, a non-faith group. It's about people coming together, having the power of their imagination to say things can be different. We'll push for politicians to do it, but actually while we're pushing them, we'll also create it ourselves. Obviously, that requires resources, it requires for politicians to work alongside too, but I think all of those things can happen at the same time.
In the middle there. Great.
A really prominent topic right now is immigration, and I wanted to know, given the coined term of the Boris wave immigrants and the current discussion on extending the ILR pathway for skilled workers to 10 years, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think is the right solution? And also, why do you think the Labour Party is shying away from something that might be pro-left, hypothetically?
I think it's disgusting, first of all. I think it's the first place to start. I think bankers pretty much plunged this country into chaos. I think we have unscrupulous landlords. We have fossil fuel companies, gambling companies, arms trade companies. These are the people that are destroying this country. These are the people who are unpatriotic and un-British. This country was largely built on the back of migration. Now, some of that is really positive, and I'll get to that. Some of that is about empire and colonialism, and I think we need to have an honest public conversation about that. But we also know just practically, so take my ideology aside, the fact that I radically think we should be humane and compassionate to people. Let's look at this even in a pragmatic, logistical lens. We have 150,000 vacancies in the National Health Service. We have construction issues where we need to build council homes and we need to build the renewable energy of the future. We have so many jobs that need filling. In the NHS, 1 in 5 jobs are migrants. Now, of course, we need to train up British workers, so this isn't pitting migrants against unemployed British people. Let's train them too. But in the meantime, it makes absolutely no economical sense to just pander to some of the worst racist, toxic, vile narrative in this country. And I think the reason why the Labour Party are doing it is because Keir Starmer does not have any morality or integrity in any of his policies. I think he's absolutely terrified of Nigel Farage, and I think he won a huge majority. Let's be clear, this is not a government that is like struggling with a small, tiny, majority where they really need to get everything through. It's not like we have a general election in a few months' time and they're panicking because they're doing badly in the polls. This government are choosing to hand this country on a plate to Nigel Farage. And if you hear anything tonight, collectively, we are not going to let him. We are going to make sure that we organize, we're going to make sure that we mobilize, and we're going to make sure, ballot to ballot, whether it's at local elections, whether it's at the general election, every single Labour politician who did not speak out on Shabana Mahmood's policies today, we will make sure that we replace them.
My friend over right there.
Yes, hi. So I think I have a question that will probably change the tone a little bit. So I think we have voted for Labour for the last couple of cycles, but they have disappointed us, for the last couple of years. So for somebody who is leaning left, what makes you so different from Labour that I should vote for you in the next cycle?
That's the only question worth asking.
I mean, it's hard to begin to even list the differences between the Green Party and the Labour Party. I think one of the most obvious and egregious examples, though, is I'm someone who's supported proportional representation for a long time. This is essentially making sure we have a fair voting system where every vote means the seats are matched proportionally, the clue's in the title. Now, I was lobbying Labour alongside many, many people for a long time to do this. And finally, a few years ago, the Labour Party had a huge conference where the trade unions got behind proportional representation, the members got behind proportional representation, and there was a historic vote where it finally got passed, and there was much celebration. That same day, Keir Starmer, a man who, by the way, who ran on the coattails of Jeremy Corbyn, ditched every single pledge before he was even in power, then saw this vote happen, and he just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I mean, what is the point of the Labour Party even having a conference? What is the point of being a Labour Party member? You are having literally zero influence or impact on this Labour government and their cruel, inhumane policies. You're having literally zero impact on this Labour government in terms of creating a better future or moving to a better society. And I would say the biggest difference, so Darren Jones, who's a Bristol Green MP, Bristol Labour MP, wrote an article in The Guardian last week that said the Green Party have undeliverable promises, that we're promising things that are undeliverable. And first of all, I don't know what he's talking about, because he often talks about a wealth tax, but there are lots of countries in the world, like Switzerland, a particularly wealthy a place, Freudian slip, who have a wealth tax, and it's worked out just fine. And it really felt like what he was adopting was, again, Thatcher, you can do your impression again if you want, who said there is no alternative.
I don't have that one in my head. I could do the lady's not for turning.
Very, very impressive. Clearly your idol.
I did a personality quiz once, and it turned out I've got the same personality type as Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, gosh. The date is off, I'm standing you up. But quite seriously, they're always pushing this idea that there is no alternative. They're always pushing the idea that to want a better, fairer, greener world is some kind of idea of fantasy politics. And I think that's the most corrosive idea of all. Because the biggest difference between the Green Party and the Labour Party is we have imagination. And I believe that the people in this country also have imaginations. But the reason why people's imaginations have been blocked is very specific lobbying, again, from big corporate companies who spend millions, if not billions, on misinformation, on media narratives to tell us it cannot be better, it cannot be different, inequality is just a natural fact of life, and that's just how it works. And it's up to all of us, particularly the creatives, if you're in the room, to spend the time to think about how do we tell different stories. Because we can spend all the time in spreadsheets, graphs, and data. That stuff's important. It's important we're based in facts and science. But if we don't tell the powerful stories, we won't connect. And actually, Farage, give him one thing, he tells a powerful story. But his story is hate and division, and they're currently rocketing through the polls. And I believe it is time for the Green Party and a politics of hope, community, and solidarity. It's time for that to rocket through the polls too.
I think that is a wonderful place to end on. Everybody, Zack Polanski.
And Sarkar!